The moment the judge said, "Play it," my mother's smile finally cracked, and the whole courtroom turned to look at me. I was still holding the same paper cup of burnt courthouse coffee, and I still didn't say a single word. That morning started like any other working mom morning. Keys in my teeth, lunchbox under my arm, praying the traffic lights would show mercy. I'd just buckled my son into his booster seat when my phone buzzed with a calendar alert I didn't remember setting. Guardianship hearing. My stomach went hollow so fast I tasted metal. I'm Briar. I'm 31. I work as a paramedic on a city ambulance, the kind of job where you learn to keep your face calm even when your hands are shaking. But that day, walking into the courthouse, I wasn't in uniform. I wore a plain blazer and flats that clicked too loud on the marble. Like the building wanted everyone to notice I didn't belong there. Courtroom 1B was colder than it had any right to be. The lights buzzed overhead. Sharp, sterile, unforgiving. The bailiff called the case, and there they were. My parents sat at the petitioner's table with their attorney, looking polished and patient, like they were waiting for a table at a nice restaurant. My mom wore pearls she only brought out when she wanted to look respectable. My dad's hands were folded, preacher style, as if he was about to pray for my soul. Across the aisle, it was just me. One chair, one file folder, one pen I'd stolen from my station because I kept losing mine to stress. Their attorney stood and spoke in that gentle, outraged tone people use when they're pretending to be reasonable. He said I had misrepresented myself. He said I had built a life on deception. He said I was not a safe environment for a minor child. Then he slid the knife in deeper. He claimed I wasn't a licensed paramedic at all, that I'd borrowed someone else's credentials, that the badge number on my ID belonged to a woman who died years ago, that my employment records were inconsistent, that the state stipend I received when I took my son in, because he came to me through a kinship placement after my cousin's overdose, was fraudulently obtained. He kept saying my name like it was a counterfeit bill. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, like she was the victim of my existence. My father stared at the judge as if the judge was a manager who could be persuaded. I sat very still, hands folded in my lap, and let their words land. I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. I didn't do anything that could be twisted into unstable, because I knew my parents. I knew the kind of fight they liked. They didn't want truth. They wanted a performance, and they were counting on me to give it to them. The judge was a compact woman with neat hair and thin-framed glasses, the kind of face that looks calm until you notice how sharp the eyes are. She listened without moving much, only taking notes in clean, quick strokes. When the attorney finished, he turned toward me with a practiced sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Ms. Wilder," he said, "if you truly are who you claim to be, you should have no problem producing proof today." Then my mom leaned forward, voice trembling on purpose. "I just want my grandson safe," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We tried to help, we really did. But she lies about everything. She always has." There it was, the family script. The lifetime nickname they'd stamped on me and handed out to anyone who would listen. Briar the dramatic one, Briar the unreliable one, Briar the girl who makes things up. I kept my eyes on the judge. I could feel people looking at me. Court clerk, bailiff, a couple in the back row waiting on another case. Like they were trying to decide what kind of mother I was, just by the way my shoulders held tension. The judge finally spoke. "Ms. Wilder," she said, "do you understand what's being alleged?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have counsel?" "No, Your Honor." My dad's attorney smiled like he'd just been handed dessert. The judge's pen paused. Her eyes lifted, steady, level. "Why not?" "Because my parents had already worked on that. 2 days earlier, I'd been pulled into my supervisor's office at the station after a 12-hour shift. I still smelled like antiseptic and sweat. My hair was knotted from the constant on and off of a headset. My supervisor wouldn't meet my eyes. "There's been a complaint," he said, sliding a printed email across the desk. "Anonymous, of course. It accused me of falsifying certifications, stealing medication, and showing signs of psychological instability around minors. It referenced my son by name. It included a photo of us at the park that I didn't recognize, shot from far away, like someone had been watching." My throat had gone tight. "I'm on leave?" I'd asked. "Administrative," he said quickly, like that softened it. "Until we sort it out." Sort it out meant my access badge was cut off by the end of the hour. Sort it out meant my paycheck would pause right when rent was due. Sort it out meant I'd be fighting two fires at once, my job and my child. When I got home that night, my mother had already posted a prayer request on social media. She didn't use my name. She didn't have to. Everyone in our town knew exactly who she meant. She wrote about a young mother struggling with honesty. She wrote about a child who deserves stability. She wrote about grandparents stepping in when the system fails. A dozen relatives chimed in with heart emojis and vague comments about doing what's best. A few old friends messaged me, confused, cautious, like they were trying to ask if I was dangerous without saying the word. And my parents knew I'd be too busy putting my son to bed, too exhausted, too proud, to jump online and defend myself. That's how they liked it. So in court, when the judge asked why I didn't have counsel, my mouth stayed controlled. Because my income was interrupted, I said, and because I was served with this petition with very short notice. My mother's eyes widened, offended like I'd slapped her. My father's jaw flexed. The attorney jumped back in, smooth as oil. Your Honor, that's unfortunate, but it does not change the underlying concern. We have credible reason to believe Ms. Wilder is not who she claims to be. We believe she has used stolen credentials to gain employment and access. I watched the judge's face as he spoke. At first, nothing changed. Then, on one phrase, one tiny detail, something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, not sympathy. Recognition. It was subtle, like ice cracking under weight. The judge leaned forward, just slightly, and looked directly at me. Ms. Wilder? She said, quieter now, lower than the microphone liked. Look at me. I did. Her gaze held mine in a way that made my skin prickle, as if she was reading something I hadn't said out loud. Her eyes flicked once, to my hands, to the faint scar along my thumb, to the way I held my shoulders like someone trained to stay steady in chaos. Then she straightened and spoke for the room. We will take a brief recess. My mother's pearls went still. My father's attorney blinked, thrown off script. Your Honor, recess, the judge repeated, crisp and final. The bailiff called it, and chairs scraped. People stood. My parents huddled with their attorney, murmuring urgently, already celebrating in whispers like I wasn't even in the room. I stayed seated because I'd learned a long time ago. When my parents think they're winning, they get careless, and I needed them careless. The courtroom emptied until only the hum of the lights remained. My heart beat slow, deliberate, like it was saving energy for what came next. I stared at the table in front of me and forced my breathing into something that looked normal. Then a side door opened. The judge stepped out, not from the bench, not from the main entrance, but from the private hallway where staff moved like ghosts. Without the robe billowing, she looked smaller, almost human, until you saw how controlled her posture still was. Ms. Wilder, she said, and her voice had a different edge now. Not judgment, memory. I stood, careful, and followed her into a narrow anteroom with a water cooler and the state seal on the wall. The air smelled faintly of paper and old carpet. Up close, I saw a pale line crossing her collarbone before it disappeared under her blouse. An injury that had healed, but not politely. She shut the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "You're still doing it the same way." My throat tightened. "Doing what?" "Keeping your voice calm," she replied. "Letting other people assume your silence is weakness." My hands went cold, because nobody in this courthouse should have known me like that. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "Who taught you to tape a pediatric airway with your left hand?" she asked. My pulse jumped hard. That question wasn't from a file. It wasn't from a rumor. It wasn't something my parents could have faked. It was from the kind of moment you don't forget. My mouth opened, but for a second no sound came out. Then I whispered, "No one taught me. I learned because I had to." The judge nodded like that was exactly the answer she expected. And then she said the one sentence that made my knees go weak. "I remember you," she murmured. "And I remember what you did." Outside the door, I heard someone call, "Judge, we're ready!" The judge's face turned to granite again, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. "Stay quiet," she said, controlled. "But don't shrink." I swallowed, feeling the world tilt. Because if she really remembered me, then my parents had just walked into a fight they didn't understand. And for the first time since the petition hit my doorstep, I let myself believe something dangerous. They weren't about to delete me. They were about to expose themselves. If you're still listening, take 1 second to like the video and subscribe. It helps this channel survive. If you want to support these stories, sharing this video matters more than you think. Alright, now let me take you back. 3 weeks earlier, my mother invited me to Sunday dinner like nothing was wrong. No warning, no tension. Just a cheerful text, "Come by. I made pot roast. Bring the baby." That should have been my first clue. When I walked into their dining room, my father stood up like a man greeting a guest at a fundraiser. My mother's smile was bright enough to hurt. My aunt was there too. The one who always pretended neutrality while sharpening knives under the table. My son ran straight to the living room to play with the old toy bin, happy and trusting. I stayed near the doorway, scanning for traps. My mother poured sweet tea into a glass and set it in front of me like she was offering peace. Then she said lightly, "We talked to a family attorney." My fork froze. My father cleared his throat. "It's not an attack," he said. "It's a solution." My aunt added, "It's what's best for the child." And then my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Thick, tabbed, prepared, like she'd been collecting pieces of me for months. She slid it across the table and smiled. "We're just worried," she said. "About your history." "My history," I repeated, tasting the word. My father's voice stayed smooth. "Your inconsistency, your stories, your tendency to exaggerate." My mother leaned closer, lowering her voice into something meant to sound caring. "We know you've always wanted to be important," she said, "but pretending to be a hero? Taking that job? Bringing a child into it? Briar, it's not healthy." I looked down at the folder. On top was a printed screenshot of my employee badge. Under it was a photo of another woman. Similar hair, similar build, same first name. And in bold letters, someone had typed, "Deceased." My mother's smile widened like a wound. "We found her," she whispered. "The real Briar Wilder." My fingers went numb around the edge of the paper, but my face didn't move. Because right then, in that dining room, I realized something. This wasn't just about my son. This was about power. This was about control. This was about my parents finally getting to punish me for becoming someone they couldn't manage. And sitting there under the warm yellow light and the smell of pot roast, I decided I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would act like I was cornered. I would let them believe I was alone. And then, when they reached for my child with their clean hands and their polished lies, I would make sure the truth landed where it hurt the most. I walked back into courtroom 1B beside the judge, and it felt like stepping into a freezer with my pulse still hot. My parents didn't look at me. They looked past me like I was a bad smell that would fade if they ignored it long enough. Their attorney stood the second the judge sat, already smiling the way men smile when they think the ending is written. Your Honor, he began. We're prepared to proceed with testimony and to introduce exhibits demonstrating counsel. The judge cut in, calm and sharp. Approach. My mother's pearls shifted as she leaned toward her attorney, whispering something that made him grin wider, like she'd just promised him an easy win. I stayed where I was, hands at my sides, and forced my face into stillness. The bailiff guided the attorneys to the bench for sidebar. I watched their mouths move. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the rhythm of my father's attorney trying to press and press and press. Then I watched the judge's expression go from neutral to surgical. She didn't whisper. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, precise, cold, impossible to ignore. The petitioner alleges the respondent fabricated professional credentials, she said. The petitioner alleges identity theft. The petitioner alleges fraud in connection with a minor child. My mother sat up straighter like she was hearing her favorite song. The judge continued. The court is also aware that certain employment records are withheld under statutory confidentiality, and that those records may include sealed verification methods. My father's attorney blinked. Your Honor, with respect, the judge lifted a hand. Counsel, I have a sealed communication here, she said, and slid an envelope forward as if it weighed nothing. This came through proper channels. It includes verification tied to the respondent's employment and licensing status. It also includes a restricted corroboration statement. My mother's smile faltered just for a breath. The clerk took the envelope like it was fragile. The sound of paper against paper felt too loud in the silence. Staples clicked. A stamp thudded as the clerk marked it for the record. My father's attorney tried to recover. We object. We have not had time to review. You will, the judge said flatly. Right now. The clerk handed copies to both sides. I watched my mother's eyes skim the first page. Her pupils tightened. My father's hands went white around his water bottle. Their attorney's smile died in real time, like someone had turned off a light. He flipped pages too fast, panic turning his neat suit suddenly too tight, because what the clerk was handing them wasn't my story. It was a system they didn't know existed. A verification letter from the state licensing board, confirming my active paramedic license, and detailing a secure biometric validation process tied to my original certification. A statement from my agency's training division confirming my employment history, my field evaluations, and the fact that my access badge had been suspended only after an anonymous complaint triggered a routine internal review. Routine. Not criminal, not fraud, not identity theft. Routine. But the real dagger was the last sheet, attached behind a confidentiality notice, with language so stiff it sounded like it had been written by people who didn't laugh much. A sworn declaration, signed by the judge. My stomach clenched anyway, because even though I knew she remembered me, there is a special kind of terror that comes with watching someone speak your truth out loud in public. It feels like handing over your pulse and hoping they don't drop it. The judge faced the room. For the record, she said, I recognize the respondent. I know her. I have known her for years. My mother's pearls trembled once, like they were trying to escape her throat. My father made a small sound, almost a scoff. Like disbelief could protect him. The judge didn't blink. I met Ms. Wilder during an emergency response, she continued. When I was injured and bleeding out, she applied direct pressure and kept me alive until advanced care arrived. She was calm. She was steady. She did not ask for praise. She did her job. The courtroom held its breath. Even the bailiff went still. My parents' attorney opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like he couldn't find a version of reality where this helped him. My mother's voice finally broke through, sharp and fake sweet. Your Honor, this is inappropriate. This is personal. The judge's head turned slightly, and for the first time she looked at my mother. Ma'am, she said, and the words sounded like a warning. What is inappropriate is attempting to weaponize false allegations in a guardianship matter to take a child from a stable home. My father's face went red at the collar. We are the grandparents, he snapped. We have rights. The judge's tone didn't change. Grandparents do not have the right to fabricate evidence. My mother's fingers clenched around her tissue. We didn't fabricate anything. We found proof. We found the real person. Counsel, the judge said, cutting her off. Your exhibits include a photograph of a deceased woman with a similar name. That is not proof of identity theft. That is a smear. My mother's lips parted. Her eyes darted to me, furious now, because she couldn't understand how I'd made the room stop believing her. And I understood something in that moment that made my chest go almost quiet. This wasn't just about my parents thinking I was weak. It was about them thinking the world would always choose them over me, because they had the right look, the right marriage, the right church friends, the right social circle. They thought I was a problem that could be managed with paperwork. The judge set the papers down and leaned forward. Now, she said, let's address the anonymous complaint that triggered the respondent's work suspension. My mother's head snapped up. That's not relevant. It is. the judge replied, because the petition relies on that suspension as evidence of instability and unfitness. My father's attorney cleared his throat, trying to regain ground. Your Honor, we do not know who submitted that complaint. The judge's eyes flicked to the clerk. The clerk tapped a key, then slid a printed page onto the bench. The judge didn't pick it up right away. She looked at my parents first, like she wanted them to feel the seconds. Then she said, the court issued a narrow order to preserve records linked to the complaint submission. The submission originated from a device registered to a family phone plan, billing address matching the petitioner's residence. My mother's face went pale in the most satisfying, quiet way. My father stood halfway, then sat back down like his legs forgot how to work. My mother's mouth formed words, but nothing came out at first. Then in a brittle whisper, that doesn't mean it was us. The judge tilted her head. It also originated from the same internet service provider used to upload the petitioner's social media prayer request regarding an unnamed young mother with honesty issues. My aunt made a soft choking sound. My mother turned toward my aunt like she was about to set her on fire with her eyes. And suddenly I understood the real shape of it. They didn't just want my son. They wanted to make sure I lost everything else first. My job. My reputation. My ability to stand up in any room and be believed. Because if I wasn't believed, I could be erased. The judge's voice didn't soften. This court does not reward cruelty dressed as concern. My father's attorney tried one last desperate angle. Your Honor, even if the complaint is questionable, the child's best interest remains. The child's best interest, the judge interrupted, is to remain with the guardian who has provided stability and care. She looked at me then, and her eyes held that same private recognition as before. Ms. Wilder, she asked, are you willing to continue facilitating reasonable supervised contact as recommended by the child's caseworker, provided boundaries are respected? I swallowed. My voice came out steady. Yes, Your Honor, if it is safe, if it is structured. My mother flinched at the word safe like it slapped her. The judge nodded once, then she turned back to the petitioners. Petition denied, she said. And due to evidence of malicious intent and attempted manipulation of public systems, the court will refer this matter for review. Any future contact with the minor outside approved parameters will be treated seriously. My mother gasped like she couldn't believe consequences were real. My father stood abruptly, chair scraping. This is outrageous. We're family. The judge's tone turned icy. Family does not entitle you to ownership. And then she did it. She reached under the bench and held up a small device, no bigger than a phone, and said, before we conclude, there is an additional record. My mother froze. My heart didn't race. It settled. Because I knew what that was. The judge looked directly at the petitioner's attorney. This is the recording submitted by the respondent's caseworker, captured during a scheduled home visit at the petitioner's residence, with appropriate consent. My mother's lips went bloodless. My father's eyes widened. The judge pressed a button, and the courtroom filled with my mother's voice. Bright and cruel, unmistakable. Once we get him, we won't have to deal with her anymore, the recording said. A pause. Then my father, low and satisfied. She'll fold. She always folds. We just have to make her look unstable. Then my mother again, laughing softly. And if she tries to fight, we'll remind everyone what she used to be. The sound ended like a door shutting. No one moved. My mother's pearls shook like they were trying to jump off her neck and run. My father stared at the bench with the empty, stunned look of a man realizing he can't talk his way out of gravity. Their attorney looked like he wanted to disappear into his own suit. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Court is adjourned, she said. The gavel fell once, clean, final. My parents rushed out like the air was poisonous. My mother didn't look back. My father didn't either. They moved fast, clipped, rewriting their version of me in silence as they went. Outside, the humidity wrapped around my skin like a warm hand. My son's caseworker waited on the steps with a calm smile and a folder tucked under her arm. Are you okay? She asked softly. I nodded once. I'm tired. She glanced toward the courthouse doors where my parents had vanished. You handled it well. I looked down at my hands, the hands that had lifted strangers off pavement and held children still while their mothers screamed and begged. I didn't handle it, I said quietly. I survived it. That night, after my son fell asleep, I opened the kitchen drawer where I'd kept every piece of paper that ever tried to define me. The petition, the anonymous complaint printout, the screenshots, the sickly sweet texts from my mother pretending she cared. I placed the judge's order on top. Official, stamped, undeniable. Then I took my phone and did one last silent thing. I removed my parents from my emergency contact list, not as punishment, not as revenge, as truth. Because they were never an emergency contact. They were the emergency. I turned off the light, stood in the quiet, and let the weight of it settle into my bones like peace. They spent my whole life trying to make me disappear, so I made sure the court recorded exactly who tried to erase me.